In the previous episode, we covered forging a Feather Damascus bowie billet. Now we're at the point where I have rough profiled it and got everything ready to start finishing it out. I'll leave a link in the description and at the end of this video so you can see that video, but it mostly focused on forge welding. Now we're going to be focused on finish out the knife. So after I got the rough billet forged out, I went in and identified the center of the billet, which is the stem of the feather, I call it. And then I went in and forged in the ricasso and profiled it out. So now I've got my stem running from the tip, comes down and up in through the center of the ricasso, which I just think it looks cool. It's not necessary, but I like the way that looks. So the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and surface grind it. I want this flat, and I will cut in a distal taper. Since I'm not going to be forging on this anymore, I don't want to distort the pattern. So I will have to cut that in. So right now, let's get it surface ground. So what you saw me doing there was scribing some center marks on the edge and up here on the spine where I'm going to grind in a distal taper. Since I didn't forge that in, I did not want to distort the pattern. But a lot of people ask me what I'm doing that with, and it's just a simple tool I made. It's just a block of brass and a rod going through it with a hole drill, a set screw to hold it, and a broke carbide bit. There's all kind of ways to scribe the edge. This is just what I use. So I went ahead and finished it up to 220 grit, got it real nice and flat, especially here at the ricasso. Surface grinder does a great job of that.
Well, if I had all them fancy tools, I could get it flat too.
Maybe so, but I kind of doubt it. There is a learning curve, you know, to using any tools. And I haven't always had a surface grinder. The one I use is about 2 years old. I flattened them on my 2x72 on the flat platen for a long time. Of course, I got a 2x72, but people have been making knives for many years without it. There's really no excuse. I started out with a side grinder and a file, but it just took me longer. I like to be a little more efficient, a little more accurate. What's wrong with that? I'm not a purist. If I were, I'd go out there, dig up some dirt and smelt iron ore and make my steel and have me an in-ground forge with some dude over there blowing air through it, but I'm not. I don't have a stone wheel to grind with. I've got electricity. I got tools. That's what I'm going to use, Bubba.
Oh yeah, and you walk to school barefooted, uphill both ways. Don't forget, we brothers, I grew up with you. We rode this school bus.
Listen, Bubba, you're doing fine running the camera for me. Don't get fired on your first day on the job like you always do. Stick to the camera. No, you don't have to have the fanciest tools to make a knife, but it helps for obvious reasons. But if you want to see how I made a knife with just a side grinder, I'll leave a link in the description of this video. So let's go get the rough bevels done on this knife and taper this tang. With the rough bevels cut in and the distal taper put in, it's now time to do some normalizing and grain refining. So what I'll do is stick it in the oven, bring it up to about 1575 and hold for about 10 minutes. Pull it out, let it cool to black. I'll stick it back in and bring it up to 1450 and pull it out, let it cool to black. Then it's ready to harden the blade. I'll put it in, set the oven to about 1510, pull it out and quench it in Parks 50. Now, the main reason for normalizing and grain refining is you want to reset the carbides in your steel. So when you're doing all your forging and all that stuff, you are moving around carbides and changing the grain structure in the blade. That way, when you go to quench the steel and harden it, you have an even dispersion of carbides. That makes a better knife. Now, I set it to 1510 because I lose 10 degrees or so before I hit that quench tank. But I've only ground these bevels just up slightly. And I do that because when I come out of heat treating and I start grinding the bevels, I won't shear off good grit on a fresh belt by hitting a hard corner. So let's get it in the oven. So we got our blade tempered. I tempered it at 400 degrees for 2 hours twice. Now the next thing I want to do is grind the bevels, but before I do that, I'm gonna come in here and flat sand this ricasso area. I want this clean and flat before I grind the bevels and before I cut in the guard shoulders and clean up this ricasso. And the reason I do that is so I don't roll edges after I cut in these shoulders and the ricasso. It's easy to roll them while you're sanding, and that can cause shadows when you fit up on your guard, that sort of thing. I don't know how everybody else does it. This is the way I've always done it. So I'm going to get this flat sanded with some 400, and then I'll finish it out with some 600 later and up to the final finish. Let's get her sanded and we'll go start grinding the bevels. Hold up a second. All right, so I've got the bevels roughed in with a 50 grit belt. I'm down to about right at 30 thousandths on my edge, and I'm going to start going up in my grits. I'm going to start with a 120 J-Flex belt. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time showing the grinding here. I know that's boring, and I've got other videos totally dedicated to that. I know I have I have two, so I won't spend a lot of time on grinding. But what I want to do is offer another little tip here in case you don't go look at those videos. In between each grit, I will come in here with a blue marker, not Dicam. Don't use that expensive stuff. Mark the whole blade. As I'm grinding, I can see what I've missed. And as you move up, do this every time. When you go to hand sand, it'll save you a lot of time, because if you miss a 50 grit or 120 and you bringing this thing up 600 or 800 grit, it's going to be frustrating to come back and get that heavy grit scratch or whatever out of there. But I use J-Flex belts, and I come in here and clean up my plunge lines. Make sure they're even, get them smooth, that sort of thing. I'm not using a radius platen to do that. So right now, let's start grinding. I'll show a little bit of it, but main thing is these tips I wanted to share with you. All right, with the grinding done, I can go ahead and hand sand the blade. But before I do that, I want to come in here and clean up this ricasso and right here at the plunge lines, get that all done, cleaned up and finished, and also finish the spine. I will come back and cut in the swedge after I hand sand. Right now, I just want to focus on getting this cleaned up, and we'll go get on the hand sanding bench. All right, I got all the hand sanding that I'm going to do right now done. I'll touch it up once I put my logo on and do the final fit on the guard. So what I'm going to do now is cut in the swedge. I've got one of my grinders flipped over horizontally here. Doing it this way is probably not the safest. I know it's not. It's better to do it in a vertical position. You cut it, come around the other side and cut it. Your belt's running down all the time. I'm cutting in the horizontal position because I can see better. It's just my personal preference. I've got another video where I show how to do this in the vertical position, but I'm going to cut it horizontally. I'm going to start out with a 220 grit belt. I'm not cutting a whole lot of material, especially when I get down to the tip. I don't want to burn it either. So you got to be very careful. And doing it this way, my belt's running that direction, and I'm going to be cutting into it on one side. So got to be very careful. But I use a 220, and then I go right to a 400 and I hand sand it from there. The idea is to go into the grinder at an angle and rock into it. And I'm holding it at it. I'm holding the blade at an angle too. So you hold your blade at your angle you want and bump into it and then rock towards the tip. I'm just going to go right to the tip. I don't want to take very much here. It's just going to be a swedge gently sloping to the tip. Let's do it. All right, with our swedges cut, it's time to go ahead and cut these guard shoulders. I've got a mark here that I'm going to cut to. I've used a square to do that. I like to set forward just a hair. I mean a few thousandths. Kind of looks like when you put them square that the guard tilts back, and so I do that for that purpose. You don't have to do that, of course, but that's how I do it. Now I'm going to be doing a press fit instead of a recess cut on the back of the tang. So I'm going to be using a file guide to cut the guard shoulders. I could use my mill, but it's easy to do. This works just great. Carbide file guide. I'll leave a link in the description if you don't have one, but you can cut your guard shoulders, do real tight fits just fine with this. Matter of fact, all of my ABS journeyman presentation knives were press fit guards, and I lucked out. But you can make good fits with them. So we're going to get this carbide file guide on here and get these shoulders cut. Okay, the guard shoulder's done. I'm going to go ahead and start working on the guard. Got a lot of pieces to do here, spacers and that sort of thing. I've got a half guard template already clamped up here on a piece of stainless, and I'm going to cut it out and get it ready to mill in the slot. We get that done, and we'll start working on the spacers and get the handle ready. All right, I'm gonna go cut it out and do a little shaping on it, and we'll be ready to lay out center to cut in our slot. All right, I've got the guard put up here in the mill vise. I don't know if I'm feeling lucky or feeling stupid today, but it's one of them. Definitely one of them. So normally what I do is cut the slot in my guard, fit it to the knife, put my template on there, trace it around, then cut out the guard. That way the slot is dead on with your profile of your guard. What I've done here is I went and profiled my guard, and now I'm going to cut the slot. The risk is it being canted. If this is not perfectly straight, that slot has to be dead straight or it'll be canted from top to bottom. But I'm just taking a risk today, trying something different. But I highly suggest you cut your slot, fit it up, trace your template onto your guard, cut it out, and it'll be fine. But I'm just trying something different today to see if it'll work. About to find out. It looks pretty straight, so we're gonna see. And I went ahead and milled out the backside a little larger because I'm only gonna be fitting up about 50 or 60 thousandths. So right now I got it in my file guide, and I'm gonna clean up these corners, and I'm gonna cut it a little bit because I'm very close, and get it to about 2 thousandths under, and then I will hammer it on. We'll do a hot fit, or what I call a hot fit for this. It's not a traditional hot fit, but I've got some other videos showing the full process, but that's what I'm going to do now. Do a little cutting, square up these corners, get it close, and we'll go from there. So let me catch up where we're at. So after I got the guard fit up, I went ahead and cut out my spacers. 2 of them are titanium. The center one is a piece of mosaic Damascus. And I went ahead and drilled my lineup pin holes. Now you saw me use super glue to hold them together while I drilled them. And then I used a torch to heat them up a little bit and separate everything. Now what I want to do is work on the handle and get it fitting these lineup pins. And the way I'm going to do that is I'll go ahead and take my full block of handle material, drill my hole for the tang, and then start laying it out for the lineup pins. And I'll basically glue them on the end here and punch my holes. Then I'm gonna come back and I've got a lot of work to do up here. Work on the guards, spacers, and all that. I gotta do a good bit of work there. And then I'll get back to the handle. It takes a lot of time to build a knife like this. At this point, I've got over 2 weeks in this. And I would like to have it done in 2 days for the Louisiana Knife Show, but that's gonna be tough. So I gotta quit talking and get to work. All right, I got the handle kind of close. I always leave a buffer, of course, around so I can finish to the actual size I want. Right now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and start shaping these spacers, get them all ready so I can move on to the final finish on the handle. Then we will etch the logo, etch the blade, and try to wrap this thing up. All I'm gonna do is come in here and mark these spacers, get them close, and fine tune them. I'll have to take this thing apart and put it together 100 times at least, but I'll spare you that part. All right, I think I got her finished as far as I'm going to go. At least I got it built in time for the show, which is tomorrow. So I'm happy about that. I could have covered a whole lot more in this video, but it's already running a mile long right now. But I hope you got enough out of it that it'll help you in your builds. But if you got any questions, just give me a shout. I appreciate you watching. I'm going to show some shots of it here at the end of the video. And I want to thank my patrons, and I want to thank you for watching. Now here's some shots.